Welcome back, everyone. This is the J.S Podcast. My name is Yuras. I am your host this week, as every single week, on the J.S Podcast. And this week, we're going to be talking about the, JonBenet Ramsey case once again. This is going to be the evidence episode where I talk about the evidence, the much awaited episode. I'm sure for everyone, well, especially for myself, I definitely want to get into the details immediately. But the one thing I want to mention before I start rolling is that apparently YouTube, for some reason, is censoring the comment section. They just keep blocking the comment section. So if you notice that the comment section on this particular video on YouTube is blocked, just know that that's not my fault. YouTube, for some reason, keeps blocking comment sections that have to do with like videos about this case. I don't know what that's all about, but like I will unblock the comment section, I will go to bed, and I will wake up in the morning and I will find it blocked. And then I will have people messaging me, oh, that's a bad idea that you've blocked the comment section. But I didn't, guys. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to have like an open discussion with you guys. Like I will be asking you some questions throughout this recording. So why would I block the comment section? That doesn't make any sense. If that does end up happening, blame YouTube. I want to sort of like engage with you and make this more interactive. So that's definitely not what I'm about. And that's just blame YouTube, guys, if that is the case on this episode. Speaking about this episode, so pretty much this week, we are talking about the death of JonBenet Ramsey again, and I want to focus mainly on the evidence regarding this case for this week's episode for the JS Podcast, number 9. The first piece of evidence I want to talk about is the actual 911 call. I think it's a good place to start since it's the first piece of information we can collect from Patsy Ramsey. So before we do anything, I just want to play the entirety of the 911 call for you right now, and then let's try to dissect it.
911 emergency.
Police.
What's going on?
5515th Street.
What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is
Yes.
gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was it?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does
gone.
it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says FBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey, I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been
No,
gone?
I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay,
Please,
well,
there's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy, 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 Patsy.
Right, so off the bat, I found the fact that Patsy says police, the word police, before the woman from the reception, right, even spoke. I found that interesting that she said police. I know this may sound like I'm looking too deep into this already, but to me it sounds unusual. I think personally, if I called the 911, from the very first word, I would try to explain the situation, what had happened, hello, like I need help, like my daughter is missing, things like that. I would not probably start the conversation with the word police. Police initially, by stating police initially, it almost seems to me like it's meant to emphasize that the family is calling the police. If we are going to be going with the theory that, the family member, someone from the family actually, did the unthinkable, right? I would say that them saying police would sort of indicate, like emphasize, we're calling the cops, we're doing the right thing right now, police, you know what I mean? The second thing I found very interesting about this phone call is that Patsy actually stated the full address of their residence before she was even asked about it. I think the woman on the reception side of things, she only got to say something along those lines like, what's going on there, ma'am? And she didn't even finish saying that sentence, Patsy Ramsey was already citing the address. And the interesting fact regarding this is the only time throughout the whole phone call, right? Throughout the whole phone call to 911 when Patsy actually mentions the address. And it was said in such a quick manner where I would actually probably in the back of my head, if I was Patsy Ramsey, I would not be super sure that the police receptionist right now captured the address. You know, she never mentions the address ever again during this 911 call. So it just seems a little bit odd. How is she so certain that from, this panicky address statement, she is so confident? Because later on we will talk a little bit about how she is the one who hangs up the phone call. So she hangs up the phone call even though the police receptionist, she was still trying to be on the line with Patsy hangs up the phone call, and in her head she's probably it just seemed odd to me, like in that, if I was in her position, I would probably not be so confident that police actually has my address. Don't you think that's a little bit odd? How she only states the address once, never states it again. I mean, that's just the one thing I immediately took to myself, and I wrote this down as an important thing that I want to mention for you guys. Well, we do hear the receptionist saying that she is sending somebody over, but to me, still, that does not sort of justify the whole situation. Personally, I'm the type of a person who would try to make sure that, the police receptionist has my address. I'd probably end up stating it at least 3 times during the conversation. Obviously, we have to talk about the fact that Patsy Ramsey initially states, "We have a kidnapping." I found that pretty odd. I would probably say a more natural thing to say would be, "Our daughter was kidnapped." If you're gonna strongly believe that it was a kidnapping, as Patsy obviously does in this 911 phone call, I think still saying "we have a kidnapping" is it's pretty odd to me personally, and I would agree with some people who are theorizing that, or at least I wouldn't necessarily agree with them, but I see their viewpoint when someone says that when Patsy Ramsey says "we have a kidnapping," she almost is trying to legitimize the event. She's trying to legitimize the situation that it was in fact a kidnapping, so that there could not be any contention to what actually is happening. Like, this is a kidnapping. Do not ask any more questions. We have a kidnapping. Send someone over. This is a kidnapping, you know what I mean? I have to add here that after these initial few strange points, the conversation seems to normalize a little bit for a little period of time, and these earlier sort of odd situations that I just mentioned could just completely be explained by a mother actually realizing that her daughter is actually missing. And if that was actually the case, then you could definitely explain all of this. You would probably say that the amount of stress that Patsy was feeling was very intense, and the levels of stress were really high. So, I would, you could definitely justify her fumbling on her words a little bit there in the initial parts of the conversation. Some people theorized that the fact that Patsy said that JonBenet was blonde in between stating her age. She says 6 years old, she's blonde, 6 years old, right? So some people find it very interesting that she says blonde. I personally don't want to focus on that too much, as I don't think it's anything for us to focus on. It perfectly correlates to me personally with someone who is under high levels of stress, for one reason or another. At this point, you can definitely justify someone stating unnecessary facts and not realizing that those facts are unnecessary, such as JonBenet being blonde. I don't think it's super important at that point in the conversation, and she says she's blonde. I probably do the same thing if I had like a daughter and she was missing. I'd probably put like a fact here and there that was completely unnecessary at that point in time without even realizing what I'm doing. So I'm not gonna focus on that particular part for too long, but I will probably stop a little bit at the point where she says, "No, I don't know. when she was asked if the note said who kidnapped JonBenet Ramsey. Why I want to do that is because when she says no, I don't know, to me personally, and this is just my personal opinion, so if you don't see it, guys, then you don't see it, and it's perfectly fine. But when she says no, I don't know, to me, after listening on like to this audio of this 911 call for a dozen times or so, it does seem to me a little bit like she is a little bit annoyed that she is getting these questions, and after she says no, I don't know, I think the whole conversation sort of shifts a little bit, where Patsy Ramsey tries to get the phone call over with as soon as possible, at least in my opinion. Like, I did get a little bit of a sense that she was sort of surprised to some degree that she is getting like asked questions on the spot right now that she may have not prepared to answer. Obviously, I know that I'm entailing that the family probably had something to do with this line of thinking. I'm not speculating on that on this episode. Probably I'm going to be doing on the next episode. But I did sort of get like that sense of a feeling where when she said, no, I don't know, it was said in such a strong manner, like, don't even ask me questions right now. You know what I mean? At least that's what I'm getting here a little bit. When Patsy says, I'm the mother, the mother, this was actually found very curious by Jim Clemente on the case of JonBenet Ramsey on CBS. I don't particularly find that interesting. Stating, I'm the mother, I will say that's fairly normal in my opinion, maybe a little bit unusual, but I wouldn't cast any suspicions regarding Patsy saying the mother. And now we're jumping to the ending of the phone call, which is very suspicious. Now the ending of the phone call, whichever way you want to put it, whichever theory you believe, you have to admit here, the ending of this 911 call is suspicious, and this is why. I want to quickly play the ending of the 911 call again for you guys so that you would realize what I'm actually trying to say here. So here it goes again.
How long ago was it?
I don't know. I just found the note. Oh my God.
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey. I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay, well,
There's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy?
The last question from the police receptionist that Patsy Ramsey actually does answer in this 911 call is the question, do you know how long she's been gone? And then Patsy, in a sort of, once again, I got that feeling that she's surprised. She's getting all of these questions right now. She says, no, I don't know. Please, please, we just got up and she's not here. Oh my God, please. Then a really weird conversation goes down where the receptionist says, take a deep breath. She's trying to calm her down, but Patsy's like, please, hurry, and she puts the phone down. And then apparently we can also hear initially when the phone call was when Patsy Ramsey sort of hung up, she failed to hung up. I have no idea how that happened, but apparently you could still hear voices in that phone call because apparently Patsy Ramsey didn't manage to fully hang up, and we will get into that shortly. But I will say, I did see after that question was asked by the police receptionist, do you know how long she's been gone? Patsy Ramsey almost like sort of tried to get the phone call over with as quick as possible. And I know this is very, I know this sounds like I'm pushing towards a certain line of thinking, a certain theory in this case. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just honestly saying that I found it very weird how she says, hurry, and then she hangs up. the people on the case of JonBenet Ramsey, they made an excellent point. One of the person from that superhero panel of like forensic superheroes and things like that said that the phone call to 911 is like a lifeline. So for a parent who just realized that their daughter is missing, talking with the 911 receptionist should be like a lifeline. You should not want to hang up at all. Why would Patsy Ramsey hang up? Like, does she have anything else going on that she has to handle right now, that she doesn't have time to talk with the police receptionist? Apparently a lot of 911 calls actually don't end until the police actually arrive to the scene, because especially in situations like this, when a kid is missing or has been kidnapped, the parents will probably stay on that phone call like until police arrives, because they need someone to talk to immediately. They need to know that things are happening. But the way that Patsy Ramsey so abruptly ended the phone call, I mean, I found it very strange, and I'm very curious to know if my audience did as well. I mean, I would assume you all had to find it very strange as well. What would be the reason to hang up? Because clearly the police receptionist, she did not want to hang up the phone. She clearly indicated that she wanted to continue on talking to Patsy Ramsey, stating, Patsy, 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 that whole situation that we can hear from the 911 call. Why does Patsy Ramsey so abruptly hang up the phone? It's almost like she's hiding the phone call from someone. I know that sounds crazy, but it's like that's what we could gauge. Like she's under the kitchen table, like hurry, 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 like almost like a situation is happening where a serial killer is in their home and he's about to like stab someone or things like that. You know what I mean? So I found it very weird how the phone call ended. I'm sure you can at least see my viewpoint regarding this. It also does seem to me a little bit like Patsy may have been almost distracted by someone. At least that's what I'm getting. Like, as she is speaking with the 911 receptionist, it's almost like she's getting distracted. Now, I'm definitely not saying that that was the case, because it is hard to believe like what could be distracting her, right? But it does seem like she was getting a little bit like distracted by someone else in the room for some reason, right? Now, if Patsy Ramsey was actually getting distracted by someone in the room, right, with her, and if that person was John Ramsey, it would make perfect sense. But if that person was Burke Ramsey, their son, it would be a major red flag in this theory that the family members did not kill JonBenet Ramsey and it was an intruder theory, because let's remember, the Ramseys stated that Burke Ramsey was completely asleep during this whole ordeal going down and the 911 call happening. According to the Ramseys, Burke Ramsey was actually sleeping throughout all of this, and this is actually very important because right now we're going to be jumping to that section of the phone call where you can where Patsy Ramsey tried to hang up the phone call, but it failed for some reason, and we could hear like voices, or at least like one voice for sure. So before we talk about it, I actually want to play that part of the phone call a few more times for you guys. So here they go, and then we're gonna talk about them. So just listen in right now.
Okay, girl.
Is somebody?
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath away,
Please.
okay?
Hurry, hurry, hurry.
Patsy, 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 Patsy. Patsy. Patsy.
Now, what was being said and by whom it was said after the phone call ended, but it failed to end, and we heard that background noise on the 911 call is actually unknown. But to my understanding, these are the main theories. So let's talk about them. So some people clearly hear that, John Ramsey, the father, says, "We're not speaking to you." Now, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on it, however, because the audio wasn't all that clear, and personally, "we're not speaking to you," I don't hear that. I do hear another statement, but I do not hear "we're not speaking to you." Apparently, some people can hear "we're not speaking to you," which would indicate "we're not speaking to you, Burke Ramsey," because they're trying to cover it up. I think that's the line of thinking here. I personally do not hear "we are not speaking to you" by John Ramsey, but what I do hear is some state that Patsy Ramsey, or someone, but it's probably Patsy Ramsey that people are leaning towards, says, "What did you do?" Now, I do hear that. I actually do hear that, "What did you do?" But the only reason why I hear that, because I've been told by someone that they say, "What did you do?" And now when I listen to it, I just can't not hear it. If I had not ever heard this theory put out that, Patsy apparently says, "What did you do?" I'm not sure if I would hear it then, but since it's in my head already, like my mind is playing games with me, where I think that sentence, "What did you do?" is over. How should I put it? It's overemphasized in my brain, where I can't help myself from hearing it. But I will say I do hear "What did you do?" And I think that statement, "What did you do?" is the most credible here. And if I would have to bet on any one of these statements, I would probably bet on "What did you do?" because I think and I'm sure you guys will agree that that's probably that's the most plausible one out of them, because I think you can definitely hear "What did you do?" if you really think about it, you know what I mean? And then apparently a child's voice, really reminiscent of Burke Ramsey's voice, is at the end of the phone call, is heard saying either "What did you find?" or I've seen this video on YouTube with an enhancement audio. They make a pretty good case that he says, if that's the case, that Burke says, "Are they gonna arrest me?" So either "What did you find?" or "Are they gonna arrest me?" Personally, I don't hear "What did you find?" but I will say, "Are they gonna arrest me?" I could hear that, but I find it very hard to believe that that was the case. So to me personally, I will not, just in general, I will say this: I will not emphasize this in my investigation, because it's super speculative, and I don't know, unless someone makes a really, really good case for these statements actually being correct, because these statements are big red flags if they are correct. If Brooke Ramsey is actually awake and not asleep, like the Ramseys actually stated to the police and the press, I think that's a big red flag, and we should be definitely looking into the family members. But I think the most important thing we should try to find out is not whether John says, "We are not speaking to you," or Patsy says, "What did you do?" We should not care about that. The only thing we should really care about is whether or not we can hear Burke Ramsey, because then we have a gotcha moment, right? We could pretty much say, we could pretty much gauge that the family members are lying about Burke Ramsey being asleep if he is heard on this 911 call. So I think that's where we should focus. But since I'm no audio expert, and the audio is definitely clunky and you can't really make out anything, to be honest, I will say I will not be looking into this audio for further justification of my line of thinking, regarding what actually happened to JonBenet Ramsey. I think it's worth mentioning Kim Archuleta, which was the woman who actually was the receptionist, the dispatcher who answered Patsy's 911 call. And she said that she had a very strange and bad feeling that something wasn't right after the phone call was done. And this is gonna be a crazy situation because you know how I said that some people here, what did you find? What did you do? We're not speaking to you. Are they gonna arrest me? So we can gauge that from the officially released 911 call, right? But Kim Archuleta can hear a completely different situation. She can hear Patsy Ramsey saying, "We called the police, and now what?" And this is coming from the case of JonBenet Ramsey, that CBS show where Brooke Ramsey sued them for like $250 million, right? So she was actually on that, documentary. She says she thought she heard, "We called the police, now what?" So that's crazy. If that's actually what had happened, then this is like red flag central. But, I personally definitely can't hear, "We called the police, now what?" I don't hear this. So maybe there's someone else who can hear this. I'm curious to find out what you guys actually hear from that 911 call. So please, if the comment section is not blocked by YouTube overlords, please leave a comment and tell me what you actually hear. One other interesting thing that Kim Archuleta mentioned on the show is she believes that the phone call was rehearsed by the family members. Another thing regarding Kim is that she has never been questioned and her statements were not used in court. She kept these opinions to herself for 20 years since there was a gag order placed on the case, and I think one of the initial investigators in this case came to Kim Archuleta and actually told her not to speak regarding this what she heard because there's a gag order, so apparently that's what happened. I mean, that's definitely a suspicious situation for sure. So to round up the 911 call, I will say that the only thing that we should be really looking at is whether or not we can actually hear Brooke Ramsey at the end of that phone call. Because if we do, then that would mean that the Ramseys, right, lied about Brooke Ramsey being asleep. So that's the only thing I think we should really try to figure out. We should not be thinking about what a particular statement was. What did you find? Am I gonna get arrested? What did you do? I definitely think we should never look at that because it's not like we're gonna get to the bottom of that. It's always gonna be speculative. But if somehow we could prove that on that 911 call, at the ending of that call, we do hear Brooke Ramsey, that would mean that the family lied about him being asleep. That would mean the family has something to hide, and the family theory would gain a lot of strength at that point. Okay, so let's move along in the next section of this podcast, which would be the crime scene / DNA section, where I talk about those details. So the first thing that I find very interesting is the fact that after the girl disappears allegedly, and right after the 911 call was placed, because let's remember, only in the afternoon JonBenet was actually discovered in that wine cellar room in the basement of the house, right? There's a lot of unnecessary people arriving to the house. Now, I do understand the family members need support at this point. If that was the case, that JonBenet Ramsey was actually kidnapped, or they truly believed that JonBenet Ramsey was kidnapped at that point. If that was the case, I do understand them needing emotional and psychological support. That's why they called the Fleet Whites, some other people, right? You can find out about who was at the scene on the other episode on this case. I talked about them there. But let's say that this was not the case. Let's say if the family actually did know what happened to JonBenet Ramsey and they were covering it up. There is a very known tactic by people who find themselves in this exact situation to actually bring a lot of family friends or like relatives to the scene where they know where the body is stashed, so that those people would make the location, they would locate the body, if that makes sense. So that would sort of give them more credibility, and give them like the shock factor when they would arrive and oh my god, she's here, and things like that. So this is a known tactic. So I mean, it's not completely out of the question, in my opinion, that the Ramseys were actually playing this tactic at this point. They probably invited a lot of people. I mean, this is all speculative, so no lawsuits for me, please. But it did seem like they invited a whole bunch of people to the scene, and it almost seemed like I would see how they would probably want those people to locate JonBenet Ramsey, right? The FBI investigator who was at the scene immediately had a sense of suspicion and assumed that it was a purposeful crime scene contamination type of a situation going on at that house, and knew that the forensic people would have a nightmare, after what had happened, because I'm talking about how John Ramsey, when he did discover the body of JonBenet Ramsey, he then, grabbed it, moved it upstairs, placed it, on the floor, then grabbed it again, moved it on another, or like moved it to like another room next to the, I think that was the living room, and placed the body again next to the Christmas tree. And then there was a situation where Patsy Ramsey was all over that body. So I think the FBI guy who initially went to the place, he immediately sensed that this was a crime scene contamination situation going on in the scene, I want to mention, or I should say emphasize, the fact that the basement is actually very large. It's not like an average basement in an average house, where you would go and there's like this one room in the basement. The basement is like its own floor, like under like the ground or something like that, right? So the basement has various rooms, and I want to emphasize the fact that the place where the body was found was actually at the way back room in the basement. So for the longest time I sort of assumed that that whole situation with the broken window was actually, that the broken window was actually in that wine cellar room that JonBenet was actually found, but it's not the case, because the broken window is actually in that larger area of the basement, and that wine cellar room is like that small little room in the corner of the basement. So the broken window situation was not there. And also, let's remember the fact that the window was broken by John Ramsey. He admitted that, and that happened because he, on occasions where he locked himself out of that house, he would have a way to get into that house and then never repair that window, apparently. So that was that whole situation. There was a suitcase below that broken window, and FBI people initially thought that that suitcase was part of the crime, that maybe the person who tried to actually kidnap JonBenet Ramsey would place her body in that blue suitcase. I found it pretty strange, because to me personally it didn't seem like a suitcase where JonBenet's body would fit, but apparently you could fit her body in that suitcase. Well, obviously she would have to be dead at that point, I'm pretty sure that's the case. One of the creepy situations regarding the discovery of the body is that apparently, or at least on the case of JonBenet Ramsey, that CBS TV show, it has been speculated, or at least theorized, regarding the fact that apparently John Ramsey shouted that he found JonBenet Ramsey even before he switched the light switch in that wine cellar room. Because let's remember, according to my information, Fleet White, previously to this whole discovery, like way back, like multiple hours before that, had actually opened that wine cellar room, but he did not know where the light switch was, so he didn't saw the body. He didn't see the body. He closed the door and did his thing. But later on the day, apparently John Ramsey does the exact same thing and shouts that he found JonBenet Ramsey before flipping the switch, because he shouted, then immediately after that he flipped the switch. I don't know the credibility regarding this statement, but if that was the case, it's definitely suspicious, because Fleet White was already in that wine cellar room and he did not see the body, but now John Ramsey like has some sort of night vision in his eyes or something like that, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but Who knows if that was even the case? So this is, I have the verification that this was actually the case. So I will probably stop speculating regarding that right now. Also, from that documentary, The Case of JonBenet Ramsey, I did get a sense, or at least they were really pushing the fact that apparently the police were told to treat the family as victims and not as suspects. I don't really have all the information regarding this, and that documentary was really pushing a narrative that Brooke Ramsey was responsible. So I don't want to speculate on that front too much because, yeah, I just don't have the information, as well as yeah, I just don't want to do it right now. But we do know that the police did not interview the Ramseys on that day. And also there's a really creepy situation how the Ramseys went to CNN before they even talked to investigators. So, make of that what you will. But I actually want to talk about the DNA in this case right now. Okay, so the DNA is a very confusing situation in this case, and I will try to make it as clear as possible. And I'm not even sure if I have it 100% correct, but to my understanding, this is the most relevant information we can gather regarding the DNA evidence found on the scene. The most relevant, and I believe the only DNA samples that cleared the family members back in 2008 are the 3 samples that were found on JonBenet Ramsey on the day when she was murdered. One DNA sample is a mixed DNA sample on a blood stain on the underwear of JonBenet Ramsey. There are 2 components of DNA in this blood stain. The main component consists of JonBenet Ramsey's DNA. The second minor component, very minor component, is a component of DNA from an unidentified male. So this is not Brooke Ramsey, this is not John Ramsey, this is not anyone that has ever been identified. The other 2 DNA samples are from JonBenet's long johns. I believe for both of these DNA samples, it's the same situation. It's JonBenet Ramsey's DNA mixed with unidentified male's DNA. Maybe that's not completely the case, but the fact is that those 2 samples are also from an unidentified male, and this is a big point here. The fact that out of those 2 DNA samples found on the long johns, one of those is a likely match with the DNA found on her blood stain in her underwear, and the second one that was found in the long johns is a possible match with unidentified male's DNA found in that blood stain. So we don't have verification that it's the same exact unidentified male's DNA, that it's from the same male, but it's likely that that is the case from what I'm gathering, that both the underwear, or at least the blood stain in the underwear, and the long johns have DNA from the same person, the same unidentified man. This is important for 2 reasons. The first reason why this is important is because no one from the family has been linked with this DNA, so this DNA did not belong to Burke or John Ramsey or anyone that they have ever tested or considered a suspect. That in itself would, logically thinking, that would clear the family, right? Some DNA was found on JonBenet Ramsey that did not belong to the family. That's clearly the guy who killed JonBenet, right? In my opinion, wrong. That's not the case. But one of the theories that would explain how, people who are leaning towards an family member theory, a big explanation for the longest time, and still is to some degree, is that the DNA on the underwear could be from someone who was working in a factory who makes underwear, right? That would make sense. Now, that's pretty much impossible, and I do agree that that's impossible because what are the odds that the same factory worker worked in two different companies that made the long johns and the underwear? That's pretty crazy since those DNA samples found on these two different pieces of clothing are a very likely match. So that's completely out of the question. I don't even want to speculate in that line of thinking. If someone in the comments have strong opinions regarding that factory worker theory, please leave your opinions. I'm open-minded and I will consider everything, but I don't see that being the case. But why I say that this does not necessarily prove that it was not a family member theory, well, when we're talking about DNA is of microscopic size. In this case especially, the DNA was so small, smaller than what you would usually get from a crime scene. So the DNA was microscopic. It's not like a piece of saliva or anything that we could see with the naked eye. You have to look with microscope. So the amount of DNA is so small, it's super small, and the fact that it's only a likely match, it's not completely out of the question that this could be from two unidentified males. That alone, in my opinion, does not make that, given that information, it does not make sense to me personally to clear the family just because of that, because the DNA is so small and we don't know for sure that the two pieces of DNA on the three pieces of DNA on the two pieces of clothing are from the same man. If we knew that that was the case, okay, the case is definitely stronger, but just because it's a likely possibility and not a fact doesn't necessarily prove that an intruder was in the house and killed JonBenet Ramsey. And why I say that is because the next section of this case is going to be crazy. That's the ransom note, the weighted ransom note. Let's get into it. Apparently Patsy Ramsey is walking down the spiral staircase, and she notices a three pieces of paper laid out on one of the spiral staircase's stairs. That's a ransom note. So first of all, that's a massive ransom note. I'm not even going to talk about the length of it because it's completely it's a crazy ransom note. Experts say that they have never seen a ransom note this long. It doesn't make any sense. I have strong opinions regarding it, and these are my opinions. I want to begin by reading the note, and then I will try to dissect the note. One thing before I read, there were actually drafts. Two drafts where I think only the beginning was changed from John or something like that to Mr. Ramsey. So the person who wrote these were made like drafts. Also, all of the materials that was used in this note was found in the Ramsey residence. It was the pieces of paper were taken from a notebook that belonged to Patsy Ramsey, and that's pretty crazy. Let's get into the note, and I'm reading it to you right now. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence a earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, and don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory SBTC. Okay, so let's get the obvious things out the way. The note demanded $118,000. So John immediately pointed out to police that on the scene that the amount was nearly identical to his Christmas bonus prior to that year, which suggested that someone who would have access to that information would be involved in this crime. Police actually looked into the people who would know this information behind the dollar amount demanded in the ransom note. They considered employees at Access Graphic who may have known the amount of John's prior Christmas bonus, but I don't think anything came out of that. The police also theorized that this could be linked somehow to Psalm 18. It's some religious thing. And the themes of those writings are that thanksgiving to God and reliance on God rather than on human strength. I don't know why they even consider this. This is stupid in my opinion, so let's move on. FBI said that it's very unusual for the note to be this long. Police believed that the note was staged because it did not have any fingerprints except for Patsy's and authorities who had handled the note. The note also included an unusual use of exclamation marks and initialisms. The note and a practice draft were written with a pen and a notepad from the Ramseys' home. According to a Colorado Bureau of Investigation report, there are indications that the author of the ransom note is Patricia Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey. However, the evidence fell short of a definitive conclusion. A pathologist who had consulted with both sides on the case said that he had never seen a note like this in his 60-year experience, and that he did not think it was written by an outside stranger, indicating that he thinks that someone from the family wrote it. a federal court ruled it highly unlikely that Patsy wrote the note, citing 6 certified handwritten experts. Now, regarding that, right, I just want to put this on the visual asset. So, for everyone who is listening to this podcast, not on my YouTube channel, you could definitely check it out real quick to see what I'm actually talking about. I'm looking at a comparison of the note and then the note that Patsy Ramsey, wrote to the investigators so that they could compare the notes. And the overwhelming consensus on Reddit and on online forums regarding this comparison is that it's very clear for them that Patsy Ramsey wrote the note. I will say that at the beginning, Mr. Ramsey looks crazy to me. Like the Mr. Ramsey, because let's take into consideration if Patsy Ramsey definitely wrote the note right, she would try to change it up once again a little bit when she was writing an example for the investigators. So it's not going to be completely perfect, but even after it's changed, like the style of writing is so similar, because personally I have a very distinctive writing style personally, where when I write something down I can't read it, and it's so distinctive, and I don't think anyone could replicate what I'm like writing, and or like my style of writing. But in these comparison images, like, this is crazy. I do see how this is very similar. Like, it's different obviously, but still the general style and just it seems so similar, just the general style of it. And it was written on a notepad that belonged to Patsy Ramsey, and then also it had only her DNA on it and the people who from the investigation who handled it. So this is crazy. This is very, very crazy. And those experts that sort of cleared Patsy Ramsey, I find it hard to understand what was the logic behind it, because I don't think, seeing this image right now, I could not justify clearing Patsy Ramsey. Just my personal opinion. So if you disagree, I respect that to the fullest. Before we close out the section regarding the ransom note, I really found it very important to mention the findings of Mark McKillish, who was a former instructor in the U.S. Marshal Service Training Academy. His company provides interviewing skills training and assists investigators in analyzing statements. So he's an statement expert, and I really do find his findings legitimate, and I do agree with them. So these are the my favorite ones regarding his statement. So I just want to read a few of them to you guys. So one of the first things that Mark notices in this note is the fact that the ransom note is very long. Most ransom notes are short and to the point. Quote, "We have your kid and she is safe. It will cost you $500,000 to get her back. Do not call the police. We will be contacting you." That's all you need. So that's what, 2 lines, 3 lines? And this is 2.5 pages. I found it pretty hilarious how Mark found the quote, "We are a group of individuals," nonsensical. His statement is, what exactly does the writer mean by group of individuals? Every group is comprised of individuals. That's just so funny, actually. Okay, one of the very significant things that Mark emphasizes is the fact, the quote, "We represent a small foreign faction." Mark emphasizes that the use of the word small does not make any sense. A kidnapper would want to exhibit power over the Ramseys. The word small minimizes the kidnapper. The use of the word foreign sounds odd. Even if to us they are foreigners, they wouldn't call themselves foreigners. They would say something like, "We are the Islamic Jihad," or something like that. They would not, refer to them as foreigners. If they were foreigners, would you say that I'm a foreigner? I personally would probably do that, but for a average person, if you're a foreigner, you don't want to say that you're a foreigner. Also, you don't want to say that you're a small foreign faction. We're just some small guys. These, we're just some small guys. Maybe it's gonna work out. We're not the real professional. We're just some small guys. I do understand Mark's reasoning here for sure. Mark also found the quote, "We respect your business, but not the country that it serves," very interesting and peculiar. He says that, "Are we to believe that JonBenet was kidnapped and then murdered because someone has like a hatred towards the United States?" Most people would agree this crime is not an international incident, which I will also agree with. Mark analyzes very well regarding the unnecessary words used, such as we have your daughter in our position. You could just say we have your daughter. Also, you will withdraw $118,000 from your account. The kidnapper would probably not give a damn where you get the money from. As long as you get the money, they would say, get the money, get the $118,000. We don't care whether you get it from your account or not. Like, who cares, right? Another very key detail here, and it's very underlooked in my opinion, that whoever wrote the note wrote the word attaché, adequate sized attaché. The word attaché on the last letter E, attaché, last letter E, was written with an accent, and most people in the United States do not use a special character. But what do you know? JonBenet Ramsey, her name is written, the letter E in her name is written with the same accent that was used in the word attaché. And Patsy Ramsey, always wrote JonBenet with that E, because they were really fancy when they were like coming up with like a name for JonBenet. So, who else would be using that particular E? I mean, that's pretty odd. The word business was spelled incorrectly, but later on, other, words of like high difficulty to write were spelled correctly. So Mark theorizes that this person on purpose misspelled the word business to seem like a foreigner, but then later on spelled other words correctly, so that's suspicious. He also believes that the word beheaded was placed on purpose to make the note seem like it's a foreign faction wrote the note. There's no real reason to tell us how she will be killed, right? Very important finding regarding what Mark thinks is that the note is addressed to Mr. Ramsey initially. However, towards the end of the note, Mr. Ramsey becomes John. The writer refers to Mr. Ramsey as John 3 times in lines 31 and 34. If this was a foreign faction, they would continually use the term Mr. Ramsey, referring to him by his first name, is too personal for an unknown kidnapper. The writer felt comfortable calling him John. This indicates the writer knows John Ramsey, so therefore it's not a small foreign faction. And there are some other details that Mark made. Everyone who wants to find out, you could just Google his analysis. I'm sure you can find it. It's very interesting, but his conclusion at the end is, for him, it's very obvious that there is a lot of deception in this ransom note. So the writer's own words tell us this ransom note was not written with the intent to obtain money. Since the ransom note was written as a ruse, we can conclude this was not a kidnapping that turned into a murder, but a murder made to look like a kidnapping. This means we cannot exclude the Ramseys as possible suspects. And then also made a pretty good claim why he believes, or at least would insinuate, that, the family member, like probably Patsy Ramsey, wrote the note. So this is his line of thinking. First of all, he lays out 5 pieces of evidence that he believes links the family to the note. First, The ransom note was written on a pad of paper that was in the Ramsey's residence. Likewise, the pen that was used to write the note also came from their residence. Second, the killer placed a nylon cord made into a garrote around JonBenet's neck and strangled her. A broken paintbrush belonging to Patsy Ramsey was used to make that garrote. Third, while handwriting analysis shows that John Ramsey did not write the ransom note, Patsy Ramsey could not be completely eliminated as the writer. Fourth, certain words in the ransom note, such as instruction, monitor, execution, scanned, electric, and device, are computer terms. At the time of JonBenet's death, John Ramsey was president of Access Graphic, a computer distribution company. Fifth, the kidnapper demanded $118,000 from the Ramseys. This is a very unusual amount. Most people would ask for much larger amount. There is a reason why the writer chose $118,000. Even John Ramsey agrees that the number 118 is significant to the killer. It has been reported that in 1996, John Ramsey received a Christmas bonus of $118,000. Is this a coincidence? When the writer had to think of a number, $118,000 was on his mind. So these are the 5 points that Mark, uses when he tries to, explain why he would be leaning towards, I would assume that he would be leaning towards the family member theory, or at least in regards to family writing the note, right? Oh, by the way, he also says that the word hence, hence is not a very common word. I actually say it a lot, but maybe since my personal way of talking is like really like all over the place, since this is not my first language. So I think for people who are, native English speakers, the word hence is not very common. And when was the last time you used that word in a sentence, Mark asks. We should look to see if this word appears in any writings of John or Patsy Ramsey, and well, it actually does. On December 14th, 1997, the First United Methodist Church in Boulder, Colorado held a memorial service for JonBenet. In the program, there was a Christmas message from the Ramsey family. This message was also posted on the Ramsey family website. In the message, we find this statement, quote, "Had there been no birth of Christ, there would be no hope of eternal life and hence no hope of ever being with our loved ones again." So the word hence is a transition word. You do not have to use the word and with it, hence, and you don't have to use and. You could just say hence, and that would be it, right? For example, profits were down this year, hence you will not be receiving a bonus. Most people use the word hence and not the word and hence. The writer of the ransom note used the phrase and hence. In their Christmas message, the Ramseys used this exact same phrase. Had there been no birth of Christ, there would be no hope of eternal life, and hence no hope of ever being with your loved ones again. And now in the ransom note, we have a line that says, "Arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence a earlier pickup of your daughter." We see the same and hence, which is definitely unusual in my opinion to say that. I just see hence, I don't see and hence, so I definitely understand Mark's reasoning here. So in conclusion, Mark's verdict is that many experts, including myself, believe this was a murder that was made to look like a kidnapping. I believe this ransom note is not a legitimate ransom note. So my personal opinions are that The ransom note is actually key to solving this crime, since whomever wrote it is somehow responsible for the murders, whether it was someone from the family or an outside intruder. If we find out who wrote the note, then we know who is responsible, in my opinion. I do agree with Mark that I do think that this was a murder that was posed as a kidnapping and not the other way around. I find it very suspicious that all of the materials used were found in the Ramsey residence, as well as the fact that the writing style definitely looks familiar to Patsy's writing style. The DNA found on the long johns and in that blood stain on the underwear of JonBenet Ramsey was not found on this ransom note. How would you explain that? I personally can't. The length of the note does not make any sense to me, and I am leaning towards, at this point in time, that maybe the Ramseys did not know or were not familiar with how common ransom notes were written, and they sort of, if they did write this note, right, they were not familiar how, an average ransom note is, so they added all of this extra stuff in there to make it more legitimate in their eyes, not knowing that they were completely counterproductive in this regard, and they actually made it super illegitimate doing so. Okay, so we finally arrive at the last section of this podcast, and that's the autopsy section. I want to talk a little bit about the autopsy and certain things that I found very interesting about the autopsy, and how I just sort of indicated that I do lean towards the family theory a little bit as of right now. Well, I will state a fact that is a strong defender of the family, that sort of defends them here a little bit, and I think it's a lesser talked about fact, and I find it very strange, and it's a pretty strong advocate for the innocence of the family members. So here it's gonna come up very soon, guys. I actually did read the autopsy, and it's very long, and a lot of the things it's hard for me to comprehend since I'm not an expert, and a lot of the words I actually didn't understand. So I don't want to read it or anything like that. I just want to give the general information what was found on the autopsy. It pretty much revealed that JonBenet had been killed by strangulation and a skull fracture. The official cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. There was no evidence of conventional rape, although sexual assault could not be ruled out. Although no semen was found, there was evidence that there had been a vaginal injury. At the time of the autopsy, the pathologist recorded that it appeared her vaginal area had been wiped with a cloth. Her death was ruled a homicide. The garrote was made from a length of nylon cord, and the broken handle of a paintbrush was tied around JonBenet's neck and had apparently been used to strangle her. Part of the bristle end of the paintbrush was found in a tub containing Patsy's art supplies, but the bottom third of it was never found despite extensive searching of the house by the police in subsequent days. The autopsy also revealed a vegetable or fruit material which may represent pineapple, but this is the important fact: it may represent pineapple. We don't know for a fact that it was pineapple. So that's one thing I want to emphasize, because we do know that, there was handprints, Burke Ramsey's, fingerprints on a bowl found on the kitchen that had pineapple in. And that's the whole catalyst why, the people on the case of JonBenet Ramsey believed that Burke was involved, because his fingerprints was on the bowl filled with pineapple, and a substance resembling pineapple was found in JonBenet's system, but it only resembles, so we don't know for a fact that that was the case, that she did eat pineapple. I think she probably did, but we don't know 100% sure. It's not 100% a fact, you know. And I would like to end this podcast with that one detail that I said advocates for the family members, and in my opinion, is underlooked to some extent. And that would be the duct tape that was placed on JonBenet's mouth to, cover her mouth pretty much. Now, we can't get a good DNA example out of it because John Ramsey, once he located JonBenet's body, he immediately removed that duct tape from her mouth and then only then brought her upstairs. I understand this because at that point he may not known if she was dead, and maybe, I would probably do the same, thinking that maybe she's suffocating, or you never know, right? So we can't say that was purposeful contamination. I think that's still pretty rational to remove the duct tape. Fleet White also picked up this duct tape and had examined it, so we have a lot of people touching the duct tape. We don't have any DNA to prove or disprove family involvement, but there is this one thing, and that is this duct tape is not sourced to the Ramseys. And the quote is, "The black duct tape used on JonBenet's mouth has also not been sourced to defendants. No similar duct tape was found in the house, nor is there evidence that the defendants ever used or owned such duct tape." Now, obviously the family members could just, get some duct tape from their home, place it on JonBenet's mouth, and then sort of discard the duct tape. But the fact that they did not do the same with the garrote or the notes, ransom note, because at that point, who cares if the duct tape was from the Ramsey's residence? Everything else was from the Ramsey's residence as well, so why would they care to discard it, So that is a strong little piece of evidence that sort of would advocate for the family quite strongly, in my opinion. Right, so this is it for the J.S Podcast, episode number 9. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We did cover some really interesting facts about the case of the death of JonBenet Ramsey. We talked about the evidence, the 911 call, the DNA, that whole situation, also the ransom note, and then the interesting findings in the autopsy. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I really am glad I see new people every week. That's really cool. Leave a comment in the comments section if YouTube has not blocked the comments. What are your thoughts regarding the evidence in this case? I'm really curious to find out what you guys think about this case. And then, honestly, join me next week. I'm going to be still talking about the JonBenet Ramsey case, but I will be probably giving my own conclusions and wrapping up the case. So yeah, pretty much, guys. Enjoy your weekend, and I will see you soon. Peace out.